Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Jonathan Fanton.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this occasion, the conferral of the first MacArthur Award for International Justice on Kofi Annan. As MacArthur marks its 30th anniversary, our mission is clear: to help build a more just, verdant, and peaceful world by supporting creative and courageous individuals, effective institutions, and fresh ideas. Advancing human rights and justice has been central to this mission. Over the years, we have funded more than 600 institutions in the field, working on the front lines in 90 countries to expose human rights abuses and strengthen the rule of law. And more recently, MacArthur's contributed to the emerging system of international justice by supporting the new International Criminal Court, regional human rights courts and commissions in Europe, Latin America, and Africa, and special tribunals impaneled by the UN. As Milosevic, Fujimori, Charles Taylor, and others fall from power in disgrace, and the new ICC tries its first cases, we see the age of impunity coming to an end. A new era of accountability is just over the horizon, but to move forward, the international community needs to enforce the arrest warrants of the ICC in northern Uganda and Sudan. MacArthur's interest is not only in accountability, but also in prevention. We believe that public justice and appropriate sentences to those who have committed crimes against humanity will deter future perpetrators. And the standards set by the ICC and regional courts will encourage national courts to fulfill their obligations to uphold international norms. A new norm, the responsibility to protect, commits the international community to take steps to prevent genocide and mass atrocities. MacArthur was proud to support the International Commission organized by Canada that articulated that norm in its report. Tonight we honor Kofi Annan, and through him all those who contribute to a world ready to make good on the pledge, never again. Many representatives of the organizations that work to fulfill that pledge are here tonight, and we welcome you and we express our admiration for your courageous and effective and determined work. We also welcome the ambassadors and delegates from more than 70 countries around the world who are here. Your presence expresses the breadth of support for the cause of international justice. And I extend a special welcome to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is building his own legacy as a champion of justice. After dinner, we will confer the award and hear from former Secretary General, just back from a difficult mission in Kenya. That's a good example of the responsibility to protect in action. And while we celebrate a man who's given his life to making our world more just, we also reflect on the challenges ahead. We had a terrific panel this afternoon, moderated ably by Lloyd Axworthy, that really looked at where we are and what we must do to realize our aspirations of a just world. We were treated to a stirring closing reflection by the prosecutor of the ICC, Luis Moreno Ocampo, and his courageous and competent work is making our dreams of a permanent court a reality that we can be proud of. As a group, we've gathered because we are passionate about international justice, but also about our first honoree. To give greetings from the board, talk about the selection process, and introduce Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, I'm pleased to present the chairman of our board, Robert Denham.
I join Jonathan in welcoming you to this special evening. In creating the MacArthur Award for International Justice, the MacArthur Board was responding to the fact that crimes against humanity are a too constant reality. As we look around the world, we see targeting of civilians in internal conflicts, interethnic violence, mass atrocities inflicted by both state and non-state actors, and threats to regional stability as conflicts spill beyond borders. These tragedies show the urgent need for strengthening the global system of justice. Lloyd Axworthy chaired a committee of MacArthur board members, MacArthur staff, charged with recommending a recipient for the inaugural award. They sought a person who has been transformative in international justice, has worked to strengthen existing systems, has helped to develop new institutions and new ways of delivering justice, and has a long-term commitment to justice. This award honors such a man. Tonight, we not only honor Kofi Annan, but we also recognize all that has been achieved in the field of international justice. And we call attention to the urgent work that remains to be done. The panel discussion this afternoon reminded us of the many challenges that lie ahead. But as I look around the room tonight and see so many leaders in the field of international justice, I see an enduring commitment to ensure that justice will be brought to the most violent corners of the world. The MacArthur Foundation shares your commitment and is proud to support your work now and in the future. Thank you for joining us. We are honored to have with us this evening the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, who will now offer his personal greetings and the well wishes of the United Nations community.
Chairman Denham, President Fanton, Secretary General Kofi Annan, and Madam Annan, honorable members of the Board of Directors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to join you this evening in honoring my great friend, former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. There is so much that can and should be said of my predecessor. Kofi Annan excelled at what I think I can now confirm is the most demanding and most impossible job on earth. As Secretary General, he set high goals for himself and for the United Nations and inspired the world with his courage and vision. He led the organization through highly challenging times and helped it come through with its head held high. He gave the United Nations due relevance to the lives of people all around the world. In his decade at the helm, he stood particularly tall for his contributions to international justice, fighting to end impunity, to advance the rule of law, to protect the weak and vulnerable. We owe him a debt of gratitude that his efforts culminated in the establishment of the International Criminal Court and the landmark acceptance of the principle of the responsibility to protect. These accomplishments make Kofi Annan an inspired choice for the inaugural MacArthur Foundation International Justice Award. For me, they make him a hard act to follow. How can one succeed, Kofi Annan? How can one succeed when one is succeeding Kofi Annan? Even before assuming my office, I knew that the shoes would be too big for me to fill. And I wondered whether one day the United Nations ideals may come to be associated with me as much as they are with Kofi Annan. Yet it is only now, having walked the proverbial mile in his steps, that I have come to appreciate full measure of the man, or rather, having flown 215,000 miles in my first year in office all around the world. Kofi Annan, he gave the United Nations not only his term as Secretary General, but a lifetime of service that remains without precedent. His grace and gravitas have become the stuff of legend. And his exceptional courage and imagination remains a font of inspiration to friends and former colleagues alike. That is why, even today, the United Nations and international community continue to turn to him. And he, of course, continues to deliver. As all of us have been praying for the way to heal the divide among the people of Kenya, he made it happen. In doing so, he demonstrated that he needs no trappings of office to deliver on the work of the Secretary General. In fact, as I realize that the Secretary General of the UN is constantly in demand in all places around the world, I sometimes feel that I need an alter ego to stand in for me. On that score, I personally thank Mr. Kofi Annan for the time and effort and energy he devoted to the negotiation in Kenya. And this man makes it all seem easy, admonishing dictators by day, charming heads of state and royalties by night, putting out the crisis in the morning, and receiving an award by evening. Indeed, Kofi Annan seems to attract honors by the way Tiger Woods collect trophies. The Nobel Peace Prize, the Seoul Peace Award, the Fulbright Prize, the Giant International Prize for the Environment, and now the International Justice Award. He is unstoppable. I hope he will leave some for the rest of us. Kofi Annan is one of a kind, and no one can replace him. What is more, it is not only his shoes that are impossible to fill for me, but his suits too. In bringing sartorial flair to the 38th floor of the UN, he proved that doing good and looking good are not mutually exclusive. Secretary General Annan, since I cannot compete with you on personal dress style, I'm now focusing on the bricks and mortar of the UN building. The project to renovate our entire UN building keeps me awake at night sometimes. One thing that keeps me going is the thought of how proud I will be to show you the new headquarters complex when they are ready. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the United Nations buildings may change, but the organization's gratitude towards Kofi Annan will always remain constant. Please join me in a toast to a man who succeeded in the most difficult and impossible job on earth and who made it appear effortless at the same time. And thank you very much. All the best to you. Congratulations. Thank you. Cheers to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for honoring us with your presence this evening, for those wonderful words, and for your strong support for international justice and the responsibility to protect. We are in safe hands. The formal part of our evening will come after dinner, and we'll begin with a short film. For now, let us enjoy each other's company as a family of friends and colleagues, and in keeping with that theme of family, united in pursuit of a more just and peaceful world, we should pause for a moment to celebrate a milestone that one of our members, one of our family members here, will reach on April 8th, which will be Kofi Annan's 70th birthday.
If our different communities are to live together in peace, we must stress also what unites us, our common humanity and our shared belief that human dignity and rights should be protected by law.
One of the first embodiments of international justice was the Nuremberg trials. They demonstrated the principle that you could be held accountable for crimes that were not just against your own citizens, but were deemed to be crimes against humanity. The politics of the Cold War hindered the evolution of international justice. But with the end of the Cold War, two pioneering international tribunals were established. One for crimes that occurred in the former Yugoslavia, and another tribunal prosecuting individuals held responsible for the horrific Rwandan genocide that shocked the conscience of the world. The arrest of Augusto Pinochet in London was a triumph in building the fight against impunity, and it underscored both the importance and the power of universal jurisdiction. Perhaps the most important and encouraging development in international justice took place while Kofi Annan was Secretary General of the United Nations. The establishment of the independent International Criminal Court, now ratified by over 100 countries.
It has taken 50 years to agree on a permanent international criminal court. Persons who are tempted or pressured to commit unspeakable crimes must be deterred by the knowledge that one day they will be individually called on to account.
Mr. President, Your Honors, this is a case about children. Thomas Lubanga Dyilo made the children get military training. And Thomas Lubanga Dyilo made them kill.
Munaenda kukazi, munafanya ile kazi ya kulinda wananchi.
Wakati mimi nilikuwa na wita. Hali sasa wakati mimi niliacha mimi naacha na Teresa. Sasa mimi kuna Cesar.
Poka pale kia wakati watafika kumapigo pale njo boko na kia kama wakati wanapika kabisa nini masasi hivi pale boko ishaka mara moja.
We started traveling to Eastern Congo and gathering the evidence. The conflict is now estimated to have killed 4 million people directly or indirectly. It's the worst conflict since World War II in terms of displacement, in terms of killings. It's been an extremely violent, destructive civil war.
Hata hii mifupa mimi nadhani hata kule kupori wapi mifupa inajaa kama ilikuwa wakati pori inaisha kulungula. asubuhi na 5 du matin wakaanza kupiga vita. Wengine wenye si tulipona kwa roho ya Mungu, ya Mwenyezi Mungu.
Parce que bila justice batu kameme habataheshimiana. Banaacha hivi kesho itajirepete, ba communauté fulani na communauté fulani inarudia sawa. Merci.
To the survivors who are also the witnesses, and to the bereaved, we owe a justice that also brings healing. Only by clearly identifying the individuals responsible for these crimes can we save whole communities from being held collectively guilty. It is that notion of collective guilt which is the true enemy of peace.
Germain Katanga, who became the second person in custody of the court, is, self-admitted leader of a group called the FRPI. What came to be the case was orders that he gave to attack Bogoro village. The order went to écraser the village, which means erase, wipe out. It's not soldiers fighting soldiers. The reason it's a crime against humanity is that you're attacking the civilians.
Mr. Katanga, have you been informed of the crimes with which you are charged?
The attack directed against the village of Bogoro was indiscriminate. The following crimes were committed: the murder of about 200 civilians, the sexual enslavement of several women and girls, and imprisoning civilians in a room filled with corpses.
Nous saluons la Cour parce que la Cour a donné les tons. Et maintenant, quand on commence la Cour commence à exécuter, et à faire des arrêts, c'est un chemin pour la lutte contre l'impunité.
The International Criminal Court symbolizes the hope that by ending impunity for such crimes, we might prevent their occurrence and contribute to the peace, security, and well-being of the world.
It's amazing we had to do such an important job. We cannot fail. The measurement is not just what's happening inside this place. The measurement of this court is how the court impacts in the world. Because at the end, the court is important, but it's just a piece in a new system.
The laws and treaties that define the emerging system of international justice are transforming both regional and national courts, making them better equipped to enforce the protection of human rights. This strengthening of domestic and regional judicial bodies draws momentum from the groundbreaking work of the new International Criminal Court.
This court is for those who might be victims of the future. If the court lives up to our expectations, they will not be victims, because would-be violators will be deterred. I urge all states to embrace the principle of the responsibility to protect as a basis for collective action against genocide, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Without justice, there can be no lasting peace.
Those powerful images remind us why we are here. We now come to the moment we've gathered for, the conferral of the MacArthur Award for Advancing International Justice. May I ask Robert Denham to escort Kofi Annan to the podium, please. Justice is about rights, but also about the dignity of every human life. No one has done more than you, Kofi Annan, in illuminating that connection, firing our determination to seek a better world, and crafting a tapestry of hope, a pledge that the 21st century will see steady and unyielding progress. I now will read the citation. Kofi Annan, trusted world leader, eloquent diplomat, courageous champion of justice. When first appointed Secretary General of the United Nations, you dedicated yourself to perfecting the triangle of development, freedom, and peace. Your moral vision and clarion call to action re-energized the UN as an indispensable instrument of human progress. Your exemplary tenure reminded us, in the words of Nadine Gordimer, that great intelligence and calm insight into the political, economic, and social human condition can still exist in an office of virtually universal responsibility. Reaffirming human solidarity in an age of globalization, you resolutely advocated freedom from want, freedom from fear, an end to exclusion, and the inherent dignity of every member of the human family. In pursuit of this transforming hope, you championed the cause of human rights and universal justice, supporting key principles and new institutions to enforce accountability. From the Rome Conference that envisioned a court of last resort, through the arduous process of ratification, and into the first prosecutions, your engagement was critical to establishing the International Criminal Court. Your charge to the General Assembly spurred the creation of the International Commission on Sovereignty, on Intervention in State Sovereignty, a body that first articulated a new norm, the responsibility to protect those in danger of the worst atrocities. Your mediation of intractable conflicts, Burundi, East Timor, Nepal, Sierra Leone, Kenya, opened new possibilities for peaceful resolution. With patience, persuasion, and persistence, you helped diffuse violence, save lives, and reconcile nations torn apart by civil strife. These landmarks in our collective conscience make it imaginable that, in your words, the innocents of distant wars and conflicts should know that they too may sleep under the cover of justice, that they too have rights, and that those who violate those rights will be punished. You continue to remind us that justice is part of the larger freedom that is the true inheritance of all the world's citizens. Through the Millennium Development Goals, you called us to address the daily humiliations of poverty, lack of opportunity, and endemic disease that depress the human spirit and undermine the foundations of a truly just world order. The MacArthur Foundation shares your commitment to a more fair, sustainable, and peaceful world, for your capacity to frame that vision, your courage in confronting humankind's darkest instincts, and your inspiration that galvanizes our best values. The MacArthur Foundation is proud to present you with the first MacArthur Award for advancing international justice. Congratulations.
Dear friends, Mr. Secretary General and Mrs. Ban, let me thank you very much for being here tonight and for your wonderful and very warm words. I will make a deal with you. If you would take me around the renovated UN headquarters building, I'll give you the name of my tailor. It's wonderful to be here in New York, back in New York, among so many wonderful friends and colleagues. Nan and I haven't been back in New York much, but we are extremely happy to be here. When we left New York on the 1st of January 2007, we decided we needed a bit of rest, and we also wanted a quiet place where people wouldn't find us. So we went and hid in Italy in the Como region, where a friend loaned us a house where we could walk. It had enough land on it that you could walk without having to go to the village. So for the first 6 weeks or so, we stayed in, no television, no radio, no newspapers. After a while, we missed the outside world. So I said, let's go and get a newspaper. We walked into a tobacco shop, and suddenly we noticed a group of men out there looking at us, and I told Nan, oh gosh, we've blown our cover the first day out. And one of them rushed to us and said, Echo, I know who you are. Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, may I have an autograph? And I said, sure. So I signed K. Freeman. He was happy, and I was very happy. And there were 2 Italian security men at a distance watching us, and they came to us and said, we are also very happy. You are not in town, only Morgan Freeman is in town, and our work is very easy. And the irony of it is, I felt like a free man, and I told Nan I am free. Dear Jonathan and Lloyd, and dear friends, as you know, I recently returned from a marathon negotiating session in Kenya, where I found myself striving to bridge the gap between 2 parties that had just lived through the same events, yet had completely different views of what had happened and how to interpret it. It was an extremely challenging experience, and at times also quite stressful, as you can probably imagine. It was enormous relief to me, as it was to all people of Kenya, and I really think the whole of Africa, that the 2 sides accepted a power-sharing agreement. But of course, that is only the beginning. The hard work begins. It is vital that both parties implement the agreement in full sincerity and use it as a base for which to tackle the underlying problems that had driven that wonderful country to the brink of civil war. They will need the support of the international community in the months and years ahead. Of course, each country is responsible for its own problems. But perhaps I should tell the financiers in New York to be careful. They have competition in Kenya. A day after we signed the agreement was signed on the 28th of February. Nan and I wanted to go to the town, and so she said, let's go and get some shillings. So we went to the desk and started the transaction. A young woman standing next to us kept looking at us. We did the transaction, and she said to me, Mr. Annan, you did it the wrong way around. You should have changed the money yesterday before you signed the agreement rather than doing it now, because you said the shilling has shot up. You know? and you wouldn't have expected that she knew anything about these financial dealings, but it was an eye-opener for me. As I was saying, of course, every country is responsible for tackling its own problems, and every state has a primary responsibility to protect its own people. But I could not help thinking when I was in the midst of those negotiations how much the world has changed over the last half century or so in its interpretation of sovereignty. In the past, when a conflict arose, like the one in Kenya, essentially within the borders of one country, it was more or less axiomatic that the people of that country had to be left to deal with the problem on their own. For anyone else to get involved was considered intolerable interference in the domestic affairs of a sovereign state. As far as the rest of the world was concerned, the state, which meant in practice, whoever was in control of the state at that particular moment, was perceived as the sole legitimate representative of the people in that country. If those in control of the state used it to attack other people within the country and trample on their rights, those other people had no one to appeal to. The rest of the world could look the other way and not feel responsible. Fortunately, today, we have come to see things differently. Today, we see state sovereignty not as an absolute good in itself, but as an instrument, albeit a very important one, which has value only insofar as it is used to protect human life, to ensure respect for human dignity, and to uphold human rights. Sovereignty, in other words, should be seen not as a privilege, but as a very heavy responsibility. It cannot be delinked from the obligation that every state has to protect its people. Already in my speech to the General Assembly in September 1999, I remarked that state was now widely understood to be servant of the people and not vice versa. Only when it is exercised in that right, in that spirit, with due respect to fundamental human rights and the dignity and worth of human person, as proclaimed in the Charter of the United Nations, will sovereignty be recognized by all as credible and legitimate. Of course, in saying this to this audience, I know I'm preaching to the choir, and that is why I feel so deeply honored to be the first recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Award for International Justice. The MacArthur Foundation has worked to advance human rights and promote peace and justice through its support for individuals, organizations for many decades. It gave its very first award to Amnesty International in 1978. And today, it continues this invaluable work under the brilliant leadership of Jonathan Fanton. Where once agendas were set by governments, today civil society has brought new issues to the table and has been instrumental in, for instance, the establishment of the International Criminal Court. Take, for example, the Coalition for the International Criminal Court, which brings together 2,500 NGOs from 150 nations to work in partnership with governments, the UN, and others to ensure that the machinery of the court is put to use, and those responsible for crimes who shock the conscience of mankind are held to account before the whole global community. This is a time when the efforts of people like you are bearing fruit, and our understanding of international law has profoundly changed. It has taken us far too long to reach this point, and even now, we are still a long way from where we should be. It is already 14 years since we witnessed the genocide in Rwanda, in which hundreds of thousands of people were hacked to death. But we can never forget, certainly I can never forget, which was how a UN peacekeeping force, which was neither mandated nor equipped to fight a war, found itself in the midst of that ultimate nightmare and unable to stop the slaughter. I undertook to acknowledge on behalf of the United Nations this failure and express deep remorse. At the request of the General Assembly, I conducted a searching inquiry into the failure at Srebrenica. And on my own authority, I commissioned an independent inquiry into the UN's actions during the Rwanda genocide. It was a moment of truth for the entire international community. It brought us face to face with our limitations. It showed how the absence of clear legal framework could be used as an excuse for failing to protect fellow human beings exposed to the most brutal and extreme danger imaginable. The world was shocked, and some lessons were learned. In 2004, on the 10th anniversary of the Rwanda genocide, I launched the United Nations Action Plan to Prevent Genocide with 5 components. First, prevention of armed conflict, the context in which genocide and other crimes against humanity are most often committed. Second, protection of civilians in armed conflict. Third, ending impunity. Fourth, early and clear warning, for which I created the post of Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. And fifth, swift and decisive action when, despite all our efforts, we learn that genocide is happening or about to happen. And by action, I explained that I meant a continuum of steps in which military action would be the last, an extreme measure to be used only in extreme cases. And that, of course, is the doctrine of responsibility to protect, which was embraced by the entire membership of the United Nations in the outcome document of the 2005 World Summit. They said, and let me remind you, that the international community has the responsibility through the United Nations to use appropriate diplomatic, humanitarian, and other peaceful means to help to protect populations from genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And they declared themselves prepared to take collective action in a timely and decisive manner through the Security Council in accordance with the Charter, should peaceful means be inadequate and national authorities manifestly failing to protect the populations from those same crimes. In other words, sovereignty is not exclusive. When state protection fails, the international community must step in. It has a responsibility to do so, and those who are threatened with genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, or crimes against humanity have the right to expect its help. Member states were, of course, not intending to encourage arbitrary or self-interested intervention by individual states or groups of states. That is why they specify that such action must be taken through the Security Council and in accordance with the Charter. But by doing so, they also placed a heavy responsibility on the Security Council and on its individual members. It is fair to question whether all of them have yet fully lived up to that responsibility, notably in Darfur. In any case, while clear legal frameworks and statements of principle are very important, they are never enough. We must all work to establish a culture of protection. We must strive to uphold the principle that no one is above the law and no one should be denied its protection. Every nation that proclaims the rule of law at home must respect it abroad. And every nation that insists on it abroad must enforce it at home. Dear friends, human rights and the rule of law form one of three interlinked and mutually reinforcing pillars of the United Nations system, alongside development and peace and security. This too was recognized by the World Summit, because as I wrote in my report, In Larger Freedom, we will not enjoy development without security, we will not enjoy security without development, and we will not enjoy either without respect for human rights. When I challenged the member states to renew the UN through my report In Larger Freedom, indeed, the very title, In Larger Freedom, was intended to encapsulate this idea and to remind people that it is rooted in the Charter, whose preamble expresses the determination of the peoples of the United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, establish conditions under which justice and the rule of law could be maintained, and promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom to live in dignity go hand in hand. Poverty remains both a source and consequence of rights violations. Therefore, if we are serious about human deprivation, we must also demonstrate that we are serious about human dignity and vice versa. 8 years ago, in the Millennium Declaration, the world's political leaders expressed their resolve to free their fellow men, women, and children from the abject and dehumanizing conditions of extreme poverty, to make the right to development a reality for everyone, and to free the entire human race from want. It is in this spirit that the Millennium Development Goals were conceived. They had the ambition of providing any individual, institution, corporation, government, or international organization with easy-to-recognize goalposts based on objectives rather than specific policy prescriptions. Their contagious effect have mobilized energies and motivations for practical and clear solutions. MDGs are people-centered vision of development that must be underpinned by a fair, balanced framework for the global economy. Development with justice can prevent conflict and realize basic human rights, provided that economic growth is accompanied by the rule of law, such as an effective and impartial police, independent courts, increased participation and inclusiveness, and people-centered development strategies. Dear friends, let me end where I began, in Kenya. Kenyans, as you know, in the past few months have lived through a traumatic and murderous experience, but somehow managed to pull back from the edge of the abyss. While Kenyans and the African Union deserve the credit for this unusually positive development, the international community, the United Nations, and thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, the European Union and the US, that is the international community, the whole international community, should also be proud of the role they played for several reasons. First, the international community heeded the early warnings. Second, they agreed through my coordination to speak with one voice and act in concert. Third, there was a single negotiating process. And fourth, there were limited high-level visitors. In the months and years ahead, as Kenyans rebuild their nation, promote healing and reconciliation, and undertake comprehensive constitutional, institutional, and land reforms, I urge the international community to provide all the support and encouragement needed to make this a true success story. And in this endeavor, you, the international community, will find that you have worthy allies in the robust Kenyan civil society, the churches, the mosques, and other religious groups, the professional associations, the universities, and the private sector. So let us work together in partnership to rebuild this haven, this precious haven in a turbulent region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kofi, for those stirring words, complex reflections, and moral challenge to seize the possibilities before us. Through your words and deeds, the norms have been set, the architecture of prevention and protection has been crafted, examples of patient diplomacy given, our passion for justice ignited, our compassion for those at risk or in need deepened, and our determination to turn noble aspirations into reality strengthened. We owe you a great deal. Thank you. And now to close our evening, our senior trustee, professor of law at Yale, Drew Days.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mr. Secretary General, I want to express on behalf of the MacArthur Foundation's Board of Directors our sincerest appreciation for your doing us the honor of being the inaugural recipient of the Award for International Justice. As MacArthur seeks to advance the cause of human rights and respect for human dignity around the world, your estimable life and good works continue to serve as a source of incomparable inspiration and challenge to us all. But I would be remiss, particularly as a legal academic who has had contact with large numbers of students over my 25 years of teaching, if I fail to acknowledge the profound impact that the efforts of our generation have had upon young people in the United States and in many other places around the world, it has been powerful and life-altering. I am confident that they stand ready to take up the bold challenges that you and many others in this room have given them. Like you, we at the Foundation plan to continue devoting resources to this field in the hope of seeing a time not too long in coming when brutal injustices from war, poverty, and disease will be no more. So thank you again, and please go with our warmest wishes for many more years of invaluable service to humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, and good night.